Good evening. This is Dr. Robert Carter from the Chicago School Masters of Public Health program. Thanks for joining me on tonight. I wanted to just welcome you to our mentoring fireside chat. And tonight, the focus of the discussion is what I'm going to talk with you about are lessons you won't learn in the classroom. So many of you may be current MPH students, considering a career in public health, or maybe you have completed your education and you're currently working in the real world. And so often what you'll find is that what you learned in school and what you need to apply in the real world, there may be a delta. So part of what I'm doing tonight is a continuing education effort so that we can talk about what does that mean. And so, for example, you may have learned certain concepts and now you're working in public health, maybe community health, or maybe working for non-profit, state, federal, um, government, and now you're looking at, okay, I learned this how to do a program assessment, and now I'm actually having to do it in the real world, or maybe you learned a particular data analytics software or statistical software, and now you're basically trying to put data, real world data, into the correct format, and you're wondering how do you actually do that. And also, we'll talk about decisions as well. So, what is really the delta between what you learn in school and the real world? Much of what we learn in school really has to do with understanding concepts, basic concepts within the public health framework or whatever discipline you may have pursued. So this can apply to public health, or if you're listening and you're interested in what else. So if you take what I'm saying today about public health and you apply that to whatever discipline you're in, there'll be some commonality. And so, what I want to share is lessons that you don't necessarily learn or that's taught in textbooks, but you're curious on how you're going to survive and thrive in public health or whatever field you're actually in. And so, if you listen to just the first 5 minutes of this, I will share with you some tips, and then I will continue to iterate throughout the next 20 minutes on what you actually need to do to be successful. So I'll cover just quickly the first four lessons that I've learned, and that is resilience. Okay, that politics matter, that public health decisions are not made purely on science, but they're made a combination of science and politics. So if you're fixated on purely decisions that are made by data and science, you'll be wrong because sometimes there are politics that actually play into it for obvious reasons, which I'll talk about. And then the third lesson is networking isn't slimy. That reality is that relationships make things happen. Funding, collaboration, career moves. Bottom line is networking isn't slimy, is necessary, and we'll talk more about that. And then the fourth lesson that I'll really touch on tonight, and that is, as a public health professional, you need to be able to speak multiple languages. And what I mean by that is that whether you're talking to a community member, you're talking with a funder, you're talking with a policymaker, you need to be able to take what your language you're speaking in and translate public health speak to that community. What that's going to actually do is allow you to tailor your message so that you connect. And what that connection is going to do is going to help you unlock success, meaning that whatever you're trying to achieve, whether it's a collaboration with a community member, you're trying to secure some funding, or you're trying to help a policy maker advance a policy that you're interested in, all of that is going to actually help you open that door. So again, what are the four lessons? The four lessons are resilience, policy and politics matter, networking isn't slimy, and how do we speak through multiple languages? So what I'll do now is go back through each one of those, okay? Each one of those. So again, what is our theme today? I want to share with you lessons that you didn't learn from textbooks or that the textbooks won't teach you, but it's crucial that you learn those for surviving and thriving in public health or whatever field you're in. So, lesson one, as I mentioned before, resilience. Okay. So, the bottom line is that success is not linear. Okay. Success has ups and downs. Okay. Job proposals get rejected, applications for jobs get rejected, opportunities within your own company, within your own institution. You may not necessarily always get the promotion that you're looking for. You may be working on a grant as a principal investigator or as a contributor. Grants get rejected. And policies take years to change. So if you look at any policy that was a win, and if you go back and look historically, it was a lot of sweat, blood, and tears. Many people actually work to advance that. And just because it's your baby and you're passionate about it, you have to be resilient, because the folks that actually advance that whatever agenda up to a certain point, had some setbacks, and sometimes it's years of setback, and then you make some ground, and it's a constant accordion of going back and forth, much like a battlefield in a civil war. They would make some advances, and then next day take some setback, back and forth, to eventually you have an opportunity to actually win. So if you don't embrace resilience, then you will experience significant hardship. That's not something that you learn in the textbook. The textbook says, yep, you do this, this, and this. These are the 10 steps to do X. And if you follow these 10 steps, then you achieve that. The reality is that you do step 1, 2, 3, and then you go back to 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, and maybe you go back to 2. And then over time, with resilience and basically the next things that we'll talk about, you'll be able to get over that. Okay, so again, success is not linear. In order to be successful, you got to thrive in a chaotic environment, and you have to be resilient. So the next lesson that I would like to touch on, what is that? Politics matter. The reality is that public health decisions are not made purely on science. They're made through politics. It's a combination of politics and science and an art. Okay, so what you may actually experience is that, when a political strategy change, the outcome may change, whether it's good or bad. And sometimes we get caught up emotionally. Well, this policy is bad for this particular disease or condition. But the reality, as public health professionals, we have to be adaptive. We have to basically say, yep, um, this policy may not necessarily jive with how I see the world, how maybe scientific data supports, but the reality is that as a public health professional, you have to be agile and adapt to the politics, which politics matter, funding matter, all of the things, relationships. So you got to really develop what I refer to as a long view mindset, okay? And you got to stay mission driven and not ego driven, or emotionally tied to a particular outcome. So from a politics matter perspective, is that if you're not on the table, not at the table, you're on the menu. So if you said, hey, these politics don't jive with me, then put yourself on the menu. Okay. The way you stay seated at the table, regardless of the politics, is keeping an agile mindset focused on the long view, stay mission driven and not ego driven. Okay. So that's critical. Okay. The other aspect of it, is advice from a politics perspective, is understand the system, learn the basic advocacy skills, build credibility. And what you'll find is that regardless of what person is sitting in the driver's seat, state, federal, local level, mayor, whoever, you'll be able to basically get into their space because they know that you understand the system. They know your basic advocacy skills. You can step aside, understand where they are, right, and how you can advance a particular agenda regardless of the politics. Maybe with certain political environments, you can make much faster leaps and bounds. Others, you may have to stay status quo. Maybe your goal is just to not lose ground. So maybe one particular political environment, depending on the politics and the issue, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, politics change. Your goal may not necessarily be to go to 5 to 6 to 7. It may be just, okay, I'm going to hold 5. At worst case scenario, I'm going to lose to 4, but I'm not going to lose ground, right? And then you hold status quo, and then the group that's in that really supports what you're trying to achieve, you start off at 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. You inch up, oh, I'm almost to 10, but okay, politics have changed, funding has changed. My goal is to basically maybe not regress more than 6. Okay, maybe you have to sit there for several years. That's that resilience piece. And then bam, 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 you're able to advance, get that policy into law, support it, funding. But the bottom line is that you have to understand the system. You have to develop a long view mindset, and you have to actually understand basic advocacy skills. Basic advocacy skills. So let's build on, let's just touch on, now that we're through lesson 1 and lesson 2, okay, what advice am I giving you? And I've been saying that, okay, first piece of advice, okay, develop a long view mindset, stay mission driven, not ego driven, understand the system, learn basic advocacy skills, and build credibility. Okay, so now let's go into lesson 3. Okay, lesson 3, if you recall, networking isn't slimy. Okay, what does that mean? Is that the real talk is relationships make things happen. What is that? Funding, collaboration, or career moves. Networking, relationships make things happen. And so what you actually see is that doors open because of genuine relationships, not networking events. So as we matriculate through life and we build relationships, we have to foster relationships, genuine relationships. How do you know that you have a genuine relationship? Someone that actually reaches out to you for advice, you reach out to them for advice, and you can send them a text and they respond and say, hey, Rob, this is what I'm thinking. You can call them, and it's non-transactional. That's the big thing is, relationships that's transactional, folks say, oh, shit, here is Rob or whoever, calling me again. They must want something. You don't hear back from them from several days. That's a transactional relationship. Well, they call you, when they need something. Think about like relationships, like you reach out to somebody just to have small talk sometime. You think about, building and say, hey, what's going on? You just kind of like talking about something unrelated. And then you may not even talk every time about some type of business. That's non-transactional. That's networking. That's building your network. That's genuine relationships. You may start off like, hey, what's going on with how the kids doing? And before you know it, you're 10 minutes into it, and then you say, oh, by the way, let me ask you this question. But those are genuine relationships. Okay, so what does that mean? Okay, networking, as I mentioned before, isn't slimy, and networking shouldn't be. You should be working on building genuine relationships, networks that matter, and not a networking event. If you only talk to folks, get the business card, send them an email the next day, and next time you reach out to them, it's because you need something. That is not a genuine relationship. So what's the advice? You got to be curious, generous, and follow up in an authentic way. So curious, generous, or generosity, right? Meaning that sometimes you may have to give up something, but the long term to actually have a relationship, to have something. Okay, so follow up in an authentic way. Okay, the last point that I'll hit on tonight, the fourth lesson, is speak multiple languages. So often I encounter individuals that can't speak multiple languages. They basically, regardless of who they're talking with, a community leader, a funder, a policy maker, they're talking jargon. They're talking, basically, they're not meeting the people, right, where they are. One of my heroes from the great state of Louisiana, Huey Long. Huey Long was governor of Louisiana, later became senator, and if he would not have been assassinated, he probably would have been the governor. Sorry, he would have been the president of the United States. Fortunately, he was assassinated. But one of the things that you learn from like Huey Long was talking with a group of policymakers. He taught policy speak. If he was talking to a group of funders, basically folks that he was trying to get, he would basically, if they were from the oil and gas industry. He was right there talking about what it meant to them. He was able to gravitate, pull them in, and basically they understood what he was and he understood where they were. Okay, if he was meeting with a group of farmers, he would connect with them. One of the ways, funny enough, he would connect. One time he was on stage in Louisiana, rural Louisiana, basically talking about his farm bills and what he was going to do for the farmers, and his shoe just happened to fall off, and he had a hole in his sock, and I can guarantee you that he was definitely a man of character, but one of the things that ultimately happened, the farmers, I'm sure, were like, Huey Long has a hole in his sock. Wow, interesting. He developed a cognitive, basically, bond with those guys because they were like, you know, you can just imagine what was going on. Through some of them may have been like, hey, this guy is like faking, but the reality is a lot of them saw it as authentic, right? Saw it as a way that he was building credibility with them, and he was building a genuine relationship with the farmers. So, what does that mean? The example is that a time when tailoring the message unlocks success. So, you have to be able to tailor your message, tailor your time, tailor your language in order to be successful. And the big takeaway from speaking multiple languages is adaptability is power, right? Adaptability is power. And so, practice translating your work for different audiences without losing your core message. You got to practice that. What's my core message? Okay. And then how do I basically make that core message mean something to all the people, funders, collaborators, folks that may help me get my next job, community members, policymakers, whoever that is. You got to basically take your whatever it is, and make it mean something to somebody. Okay. So I'll just quickly reiterate the 4 lessons. We're talking resilience, policy matters, networking isn't slimy, speaking multiple languages. And then my final thought with you is school gives you a variety of tools. Have 5 academic degrees, 3 master's degrees, PhD, bachelor's degree, and so I'm a strong advocate for school. School fundamentally gives you some critical tools. Experience also gives you wisdom, okay? But the reality, the delta between that is that if you have to basically learn everything that you learned through your own experiences, you're gonna be behind. So one of the things that you have to do is basically find shortcuts, right? So looking at, okay, what have others learned? So you don't have to learn it all over again. So like not having to learn each time what others have learned will allow you to basically advance. So my challenge to you is I invite each of you to begin practicing these lessons now, not later. And if you have any questions for me, you can always reach out to me. I'll be available. My information, you can find it there in the chat section. And again, this is Dr. Robert Carter from the Chicago School Master Public Health Program. Have a great evening. Thank you.